Hey there, welcome back to camp. I'm Rich Hawkins. Today we're at the Mount Alamuchi Scout Reservation by our big climbing tower, and we're going to take a look at the different ropes and how we use them while we're climbing. Climbing is a dangerous activity and should never be attempted without proper supervision and training. Let's get into it. So when we're climbing, we use a type of rope called Kern-Mantle. It's a little different than what you would use to tie your knots and lashings in your campsite, and it's meant to be very strong and very reliable. It's made of two different parts, the kern and the mantle. The kern is that inner core. All of these strands down the center, here they're very tightly twisted, make up the kern. That's where all the strength of the rope is. The mantle is this outer shell, the part that you would normally see while you're climbing or while you're tying your knots. The mantle is sacrificial. Really, it only makes up about 10% of the strength of the rope. And when we're talking about ropes that are meant to hold thousands of pounds, it's not all that much. The mantle is meant to be worn. If something's going to be damaged, we want it to be the mantle, so that the kern, the strength of the rope, is protected, at least until we can get done with our climb and check our rope and find what was going wrong. Within Kern-Mantle ropes, you have two different types, dynamic and static. A dynamic rope is what we use when we're climbing. It's what we're tied into to protect us from a fall. It's very soft, very supple. It bends easily. You can tie it into knots very simply, and it takes that twist and adapts to it very well. A dynamic rope is great for protecting us. It gives us a little bit of stretch when we fall as well. That little bit of elasticity, maybe 10%. So for every 10 feet of rope, you would get an extra foot of stretch. Different ropes have different amounts of stretch, but give or take 10 to 20% usually for a dynamic rope. Static ropes aren't meant to stretch. If you're holding a load or holding somebody on a lowering and just bringing them down, or if they're rappelling, you don't want your rope to stretch out. That elasticity makes it very uncomfortable for the climber. So using a rope that is static and has very little give, less than 10% of stretch for the rope, is a much easier ride for most climbers on the way down. The way that we can tell a static from a dynamic usually is by the feel. We said a dynamic rope is very easy to bend. Here we can see it bends very sharp and makes a nice small curve. A static rope, and here's another sample, just doesn't want to bend that easily. You can do it, but you have to really work at it. One of the other quick and easy ways is to just look at the ropes. A static rope will generally have fewer colors in a simpler pattern. A dynamic rope will be more colorful with a more complex weave pattern, just so that you can tell it apart. Ultimately, unless you're buying the rope, you really won't know, but some easy ways to check: look for the colors, look for how supple it is. If it's a little stiff, chances are it might be a static rope. The way that a static rope is made is different from a dynamic rope. We said that the mantle and the kern make up the rope, but the kern of a static rope is different from the kern of a dynamic rope. Here on the dynamic, we can see that it's twisted and there's left and right hand twisted sections. We'll get a close-up for you. On a static rope, there's no overall twist. Each of these strands, while it's wavy, is very straight. There's no twist to act like a spring, because that's what happens when you load and put a lot of weight on a dynamic rope. All of these strands try to untwist, and then as you remove that load, they twist back up and help each other tighten back up, and that's what gives a dynamic rope that stretch. You can find ropes in different sizes, in different strengths, but it's always important to remember that when we climb, we need a rope that's made for climbing. You don't go to your local Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart and find something that looks like a Kern-Mantle rope. Kern-Mantle ropes are used for clotheslines and bear bags. They're not strong enough. They're not meant for climbing. When we climb, we want to make sure that the rope we get is made correctly, is made to specification so that it's going to be super, super strong, that it's made durable enough, and that we can trace how it was made. The tracking for most of these ropes, here's a fantastic example. The manufacturers will put a special strand in the rope with lot information so that they can track when it was made, how old the rope is, even where it was originally sold to for distribution, so that if something does go wrong and the problem was the rope, the company can make an easy recall and track down anybody else who purchased a similar rope. You just don't find that kind of reliability when you're dealing with off the shelf at a Home Depot or a Lowe's, at a hardware store. You really have to find rope that's meant for it. So that's some of the easy things that we talk about when we're looking at the different types of rope that we use while we climb. Finally, some storage. When you keep your ropes, we want to make sure that they're kept neat, they're kept dry, they're kept secure. Here at camp, each of our ropes has a bag. The bags make it very easy for storage. Instead of having a complex coiling or having to make sure our loops are secure, we tie off the ends of our rope. Here we can see one end is tied here, the other is over here. We do what's called flaking the rope, where we make sure that it's not twisted or knotted, and we string the rope out along this big tarp. Then finally, the tarp folds in and creates a nice tight little bag. So the next time we want to use our rope, we lay out the tarp, untie one end, and the rope, without being twisted or knotted, can be pulled right off that tarp, right out of the bag very easily. It makes storage a lot easier for our staff, but it also keeps any unwanted critters or animals out of our bags of rope when we're storing them throughout the season, throughout the year. So this has been just a little bit about the ropes that we use when we're climbing. If you have any questions, if you want to learn more, ask an expert, check out a rope manufacturer. They have lots of wonderful information on the knots that you can use, their storage, and even their manufacturing process. Most of all, stay safe out there and climb on.